Thanks for coming today. This is a new episode of Writer's Infusion. We're filming live at the Cambridge Library. So let's introduce everyone. Jen, Ed, and Collette, our special guest critiquer. Our literary agent is wonderful. And then we have our writer, Dan Biles, and Julie and Dave, who are also wonderful.
You're wonderful, I'm wonderful.
So today we have, so Dan was chosen, so he didn't know he was going to be up here till now. Dan wrote a thriller. What we're going to read is pages from the middle of the story. And I should make a note here too that when we do get pages from the middle, some of it can be, and I should have said this earlier, sometimes it's a little tough to critique because we might not know something that's going on and we'll say, oh, well, we didn't know what was going on, whereas it's just hard to tell. So sometimes you can come back and let us know that as well. Do you want me to read the summary, or do you want to start?
I'll read it.
Okay, so let's get started.
2 days ago, during rush hour, terrorists released 25 rabid black mambas into Grand Central and into the subway beneath. Amy's a herpetologist from the museum and Charles the track inspector. They went into the subway looking for mamba eggs, and they've captured a live adult and a newborn. Should we just keep going?
Yes.
As the police cruiser rolled up Madison Avenue, Amy leaned against the open window, letting the fresh air wash over her. She wondered if she could ever ride the subway again. The cop cut into the park at 79th Street and Belvedere Castle flew by on the right. They came out on the west side with the museum's imposing facade directly in front of them. Her graduate student was waiting on the loading dock with a transport cage. Amy thanked the officer, who was clearly anxious to leave, and together they brought the two mambas upstairs to her lab. Her student transferred the baby into a terrarium, and Amy took the adult over to a large plexiglass box in the corner. 2 pincer tongs similar to her snake stick were set into the plastic along its front, allowing the contents to be manipulated from the outside. There were access ports on each side, a small one on the left and a much larger one on the right. She placed the bag snake inside and locked the lid. On the side with the small port, a squat silver cylinder with a purple band read isoflurane. She pushed in the lock, twisted the dial on top to 2%, and waited. After about 10 minutes, the snake lay still and she prodded it with one of the tongs. There was no response, so she pushed the neck of the bag out through the small port and cut it off with a pair of trauma shears. Then she closed the port and shook the big snake out of the sack with the other tong. It fell in an anesthetized heap on the bottom of the box. Indeed, it was there, a tiny metallic button on the rear of the mamba's head. Amy turned the dial down to 1% and went over to a rack by the x-ray table. It held an assortment of plexiglass tubes of various sizes and lengths. She selected one 3 feet long, about 4 inches across, and returned to the box. One end of the tube was closed, and the other had an adapter that fit perfectly onto the large access port. Amy opened the port and attached the tube, then waited a few minutes for the isoflurane vapor to equilibrate. Using one of the tongs, she gently picked up the mamba's head and fed it out to the end of the tube. Wheeling the whole assembly over to the x-ray table, she positioned the mamba's head under the cone. She took a straight down shot, then wheeled the cone around for a lateral. When it flashed onto the screen a few seconds later, Amy let out a little chirp of surprise and stepped closer. She brought up the magnification and called the graduate student over. They both stared at the image in silent amazement for a second. Then her student pointed and said, "What's that?" On the lateral view, a tiny wire filament descended from the button into an area Amy knew was the snake's midbrain. Her jaw fell open as its purpose dawned on her. What have they done, she thought. As she said this, Charlie was parked in the city planner's office, nursing a third cup of coffee in front of the microfiche reader. He pulled all the plans for the Times Square shuttle on the Lex going back 60 years and was perusing them one by one. There were a lot of them, and it was slow going. Finally, just before midnight, he saw something that made him put his coffee down and lean into the viewer. Under his breath, he said, "Oh, Christ," and reached for the phone. It's a new chapter now. The phone rang in Amy's lab and she picked it up. "Dr. Martin?" "Amy, it's Charlie. Glad you're still there. I found something and you're not going to like it." "Yeah, same here. I think I know why I'd attacked you." "Bring what you found and come up to the door on 81st. The guard will let you in." "All right, see you in a few," Charlie said. He hung up the phone and hit the print button. 20 minutes later, the police escorted him onto the FDR and they headed towards the museum. He left his car at the loading dock and the guard brought him up to Amy's lab. She nodded a greeting and said, "Thanks for doing that, Charlie." "Sure. I brought some printouts. You need to see this, he said, and patted the folder under his arm. Over in the corner, the baby mamba searched its terrarium for a way out. Its greenish belly caught his eye as it pressed against the front pane, and he went over to look at it. Oblivious to the half-inch of glass, as he approached, it still reared up and displayed its black mouth. Leaning closer, he could see the tiny drops of venom hanging off its little fangs. He recoiled with a frightened grunt. He'd never realized how deathly afraid of snakes he was until now. Amy called him over. She was seated at a large computer display and said, "Take a look at this, Charlie." On the screen was an X-ray image of the snake's skull with a button and its dangling wire filament. "What are we looking at?" he asked. "I'm not certain yet, but I have a pretty good idea. I'll have to sacrifice it to be sure." "Sacrifice it?" "It means kill it, Charlie," she said quietly. "Dissect it." "Good," he snorted. Still staring back at the screen, he asked, "So what's your idea?" "I think this wire might be an electrode, and from its location, I'd say it's in the midbrain." "Uh-huh, So, she said, that part of the brain contains something called the amygdala. It's where aggressive behavior gets triggered. We have one too, an evolutional leftover from our reptile ancestors." She pointed to the screen. "If somehow this is stimulating its amygdala, that could explain why it attacked you instead of fleeing." "Wait a minute," Charlie said excitedly. "Cops told me one of the attackers had something that looked like a little remote." "Makes sense," she said. "They wouldn't want to trigger it until after the release. I think I'm right, but I'll know for sure once I look at the slides." "Slides?" "Histochemical analysis of its brain tissue will confirm my theory." Charlie rolled his eyes a little. "So when are you going to kill it?" "Charlie, the only place that has antivenom for a mamba bite is in Arizona. I called them a little while ago to see if I could get some. They said the attack used up what little they had and asked me to milk this one so they can make more." "Milk it? Like a cow?" She smiled. "No, not quite. It means collect their venom." He turned to her with a shocked look. "How the hell do you do that?" "It's not that hard, actually. You stretch a latex glove over a jar and make them bite through it. The venom's automatically expelled and collects in the jar." "Sounds pretty dangerous." "Yeah, it's not very hard, but it is kind of dangerous. Lots of people have been bitten that way. It's got to be done, though. Without it, we can't make the antivenom, then people die. Untreated, a mamba bite is 100% fatal. So right now, getting that venom is more important than proving my theory." "You've got to keep it alive, then?" "A couple days, yeah. I'll get enough so they can sequence the antigenic portion, and the CDC can bioengineer a big batch." "Huh?" He gave her a blank look. "Use it as a template to make more," she said. "Now what do you have to show me?" His puzzled look vanished, replaced by a dead serious one. He pulled a printout from the folder he carried and showed her. "They put up that wall in 1972 and they laid a new wider track for the Times Square shuttle. You saw it's a little damp down there, so once the wall was up, they figured they needed to drain. They should have connected it to the street drainage system, but for some reason, probably budget, they didn't. If they had, those little snakes would have ended up in the East River, and they'd probably be killed by all the commercial traffic. This drain connects to an old sewer line, and that's bad, Amy. Really bad. How long can one of those things hold its breath?" "I'm not sure, but most snakes can go a couple minutes. Their oxygen need is much less than ours." "Why?" "When I saw this, I called a friend of mine who works for city sanitation. He told me all city sewer lines built since 1935 have to have baffles to prevent backflow. This one doesn't. It was built before then. Tunnel guys didn't care. There's no one down there anyway. From that drain, it's about a 2-minute swim to the main outflow for the Hyatt." Wide-eyed, she asked, "What are you saying? They can get into the hotel?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Lower floors? Probably, yeah." "Oh, shit."
It's always good to have the writer be.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties, the document kept jumping.
So I'd like to start. You've got a good scary premise here, right? So you've got the snakes, it's disgusting, scary, and the whole bit. Terrorism is a big thing right now. So I like the setup that you've got. I have to comment on the side, I don't know what this says about my vocabulary, but I had to look up herpetologist and mamba. Did anyone else, or was I just?
And then the anti-venom, like, it was anti-venom, that was a different word.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it must be anti-venom, but.
I don't know that I assume everyone knows what a mamba is, just when you're writing a query there, just to let
This
you
is
know
the
that.
middle of the story.
I know, but I just meant even at the beginning.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay, so you have this herpetologist who is arriving. Now, maybe day to day, she is very scientific, unemotional, and that's how she runs her day to day with doing her regular work. But now we're in a situation that is unusual, unexpected, scary, highly emotional. A lot of people either did get hurt or could get hurt. There's a lot at stake here. So in every single sentence, I want to feel that from her. And I felt that she was just really technical. And actually I was kind of lost on this first page of the paragraph with all the ports and the box and everything, and she's going through all the steps. But how is she reacting to that? I mean, first of all, she's dealing with something that has hurt people. It could still be out there. And so I think when you're getting into this scene, and the graduate student would be the same, especially the graduate student. The graduate student hasn't been doing this for a long time. So when they first drop off the snake or the eggs or whatever they're dropping off, and they're walking in together, they're not just, this isn't like a gardener snake. This is like a thing that can cause a huge issue. I think that they should be having conversation. I think that when she's examining it, she's thinking this one that Charlie and he got hurt, or there's emotion in every second. And the graduate student, in my opinion, is not going to be on some corner of the lab doing something and walking over. The graduate student's going to be like this to the glass, wanting to know every step of what his or her mentor is doing. And I think that you really need to bring that into this scene, and that's how I wanted it over. And I think you could, if you bring in that emotion and that talking, I think it would add a lot. Sure. So that's awesome. Are you going to disagree?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I read this summary, I said, I went into it with a bad attitude. Snakes on a plane, I saw that.
Snakes on a tree.
Oh, no, here we go again. But this has an unusual twist, and I like the scientific sequencing of logic that's going to run to a conclusion. It's a little bit over my head, and we introduced to it, I had to think about it, but step 1, step 2, step 3, I understood what was going on in life. As to the hysteria, I think the scientist cannot be hysterical. People around the scientist can be hysterical, and she has to say, calm down, we're working on this, we'll have an answer soon. So for her to lose it in a laboratory, it's like a surgeon with nervous fingers. She can't go nuts. Hysteria is necessary, but not through her.
Did I say hysteria?
That's it. Nervous, oh my
Okay,
God.
so, all right, then I
Hysteria is good. I mean, I don't mind
No,
that.
I agree with what you said, and I do like the step-by-step, and I like the scientific part of it, but I still feel like they need to be conversing. I think that,
Oh, fine.
you know,
Absolutely.
this has just been there. There's no pullback.
Well, maybe you can separate the two, because there are two characters here.
Mhm.
I mean, the scientist can be the Sherlock Holmes, and the graduate student can be the Dr. Boston. The graduate student can have the emotions, like, holy crap, or, you know, whatever, have the reactions, and have the scientist be in control, know what we're doing, here's how we figure it out.
Right, the scientific method.
Yeah.
Procedural. And rely on the procedure. The procedures never fail.
Right.
But she's also a human being,
Mhm.
and she can think to herself, oh my God, I've never seen a mom in this kind of situation. Calm down, baby. You are a professional.
Exactly,
And
that's
that
fine.
racks
That's fine.
the tension
Yeah.
even more. The
That's great.
I
conflict.
have to take a deep breath, yeah.
Yep.
But she can't show the emotions.
No.
Internally, we can find out as the reader, but hysteria around her is super. Because she's not only in control of the lab, she's in control of the people who are going to help her. And probably later on, the news blasts are going to come through her. She's the herpetologist. So she cannot lose control. But the rest of it, I thought, I loved it. Again, I went into it with a really bad feeling, hysterical, nervous snakes, and people running around. No, this is I forget the name of the movie. Something crashed in a town in Arizona. And
Andromeda Street.
Andromeda Street, exactly. The sequence of events that happened in Andromeda Street is very similar to what I'm seeing here. It's logical, and I can understand it. It's in an unusual situation, which is really what science fiction is. One unusual thing, and everybody's trying to fix it. So I tried to hate it, and failed.
That's the highest compliment. That's the highest compliment.
Yeah, it was really good, I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Right to the end.
I thought this was a lot of fun. You know, I started reading it, and I was kind of skeptical also. I went into it thinking like, oh, here we go, monster movie again, you know. But it really has a fun atmosphere about it. It's like cheerfully grim, you know. It's like that's the, I don't know, that's the way I think about it. It's like there's
That'll
this-
be your quote on the back jacket.
Right.
Weird.
It's grim. I mean, these are grim things that are going on, but it's kind of, I don't know, like, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, anytime you have snakes, it's weighted, there's a weighted distaste for snakes.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's almost biblical, you know.
Yeah, I'm not into snakes.
Yeah,
but I
snakes,
thought
this is gross.
I thought it was really cool.
This is good, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote, wow, I never considered a situation like this. It was very exciting. It was. And I like your conversations between Amy and, what's his name? Charlie, thank you. I would like you to name the assistant. I was bothered that the graduate student didn't have a name. Have Amy converse with said student, not just mention the student walked over, the graduate student.
Well, that was by the person,
Even if it's a
too.
minor character.
I've actually changed that.
Okay.
You meet
Oh,
him
good.
earlier in the
Oh,
story.
great,
But,
great.
I will put his name in.
Thank you.
He's
There-
Australian.
He's Australian, fabulous. There's a very long paragraph on the first page. I want you to break up long paragraphs, so we put in some paragraph symbols for you.
Okay.
And you have a lot of use of the word said, and I'd love for you to provide a thesaurus and get some great synonyms, especially when places that you said excitedly, and you can have, exclaimed or something to use that word instead of repeating said. But the Hyatt, oh, you got me. I mean, you can enter the bottom floor of a hotel nearby. Oh,
I actually had a question on that too. I want to talk about two transitions, and that was one of them. At the very end of the first paragraph, the first chapter we were looking at, where Amy has just seen a tiny wire filament and realizes her jaw fell open as its purpose dawned on her. What have they done? I would stop there, because then at the very end you have a transition. As she said this, Charlie was parked in the city planner's office, and it's giving a whole synopsis on what he has done. Take the whole thing out, you don't even need it. So you end the chapter with, what have they done? And then you start the next chapter with Charlie, and then when Charlie is talking to her, he can then say, I went through all the plans, and this is what I saw. I mean, that's how I would do it. So,
I did several things. I mean, I really like the way that was written. There were things that I moved around also, just the way that things are phrased, to bring it up, to smooth it out.
You want people to see all these?
Oh,
things?
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
everything's
Okay,
marked
I'll-
up, and we take, everything gets scanned and we post it on, and because you're here now, I'll scan it and send it to you early this week.
Are you saying memorizing every word that we're saying out here?
I'm trying.
Oh,
No, you don't have to remember all, well, it'll be on the video.
Well, I have about 50 comments here too. So.
Right, so there are things too, and when Julie was talking about set, and I'd like to hear from Ann on this too, because I hear a lot that too about set is actually fine, that everything else around it, the set should almost be invisible. And we talked about this in our writers group too, so I'd like you to comment on that in a second. I just wanted to say one thing with, and Jen brought this up in another episode, when you have words like large, small, not only are they very simple adjectives that you can find a better adjective, but in a lot of cases you don't even need it. So one example I have on that blog she was talking about was, I have a small cottage. Well, 99% of the cottages are they're small and you don't need the word. So that's again, when you're editing, that's when you write it all down. You don't worry about that stuff at first, but when you're editing, look for things like that you can take out or word better. So I'd love to hear about the said thing.
Oh, I much prefer to see said. I don't want it, she said excitedly. I don't want, she inquired or any of those words. Said, stick with said.
How about ever?
But said repeatedly on the same page, just it struck my ear.
Well, then I did a lot of rewriting anyways, because I thought his sentence structure, David kind, that's not gonna happen here. I thought your sentence structure was very 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I wanted to see you break it up, change it, move it around. You see, I made a lot of notes, right? The idea, maybe you could pull it off. Everyone's gonna think snakes on a plane first, and they're gonna think that thing's stiffed. And how am I gonna get this book off the ground? Remember this, publishing is a business.
Can I tell you one thing might change your mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
The company that makes anti-venom, Sanofi Pasteur, is a real company.
Mhm.
They just stopped making it because they're not making enough money.
Uh-huh.
They medical supplies get run out in June.
Okay.
30,000 people die a year. The people that finance the attack is the big pharma. They talk Al-Qaeda.
Oh, I'm so glad you told me you are going to have to change that. If you want to listen to the agent's perspective, there are a handful of things that publishers are sick and tired of saying, and Big Pharma is one of the ones. If you've got Big Pharma responsible for something, I can see the editors already going, yeah, really, I'm sorry to have to tell you that. You're going to have to come up with something else. You also have to watch your, you mentioned Al-Qaeda. You want to get something else that gets a board reaction off of the editor? Al-Qaeda in a thriller, right? Unfortunately, there's plenty of thrillers terrorists out there. Think of someone else. They are sick to death of Muslim radical terrorists. Now, you may say, oh, so-and-so has a book out right now, and it's all about Muslim radical terrorists, right? But so-and-so's already published 8 books, and he's already successful, so he can write about whatever the hell he wants. You can't, as a new writer. I know it's terrible, but just go a little further than that in your mind. Yeah, exactly. That's the right attitude, okay? I thought your pacing was very good. It's a page turner, right? I felt you lacked a lot of detail. There was a lot of detail missing here. I couldn't see anything. You mentioned, I think it was when they transferred the snake. Was it just lying back, kicking back, enjoying the sun? I mean, what's it doing inside that cage? How did they get that cage covered? I mean, you're going to walk up the steps to a laboratory and, yeah, hey, hi Joe, passing by. Look, I got the cage here, right? You just weren't visualizing it well enough. I thought your cop sounded a little bit stupid. He was a little bit ignorant, for a cop. Watch your language. Don't waste time with mundane dialogue. In reality, phone rings, you answer, you say hello, right? All this stuff is implied when you're writing, and you've got a lot of stuff here. It's all implied. And when you were reading it, I just kept cutting it out. Let me get it. Okay, sure, I brought some printouts. You need to see this, he said, and patted the folder under his arm. So I changed it to, you need to see this, Charlie said, patting the folder under his arm.
I actually I changed the same sentence.
Because you've got a lot of mundane dialogue in here. Spell your words out, no shoulda, coulda, kept, kind of exactly the way I speak. That doesn't work when you're writing. Don't write like that.
Spell them out.
Spell it out. And like you, I actually thought, well, you never use things like so. In life, we say it all the time, right? If you edit down what I'm saying right now, 20% of it would be kinda, right? But when you're writing, you never do that. You never do it. And your pace, listen to this, right? Because your pace is good, and you can make it even snappier. That's what you want with a book like this. You want me saying, oh my God, I gotta be at Writers Infusion at 10 o'clock tomorrow, and it's 2 a.m., I really need to go to bed, but I gotta find out what happens next, right? That's what you want with a book like this. Let's see. Oh, like Amy, it's Charlie. It's already implied. You don't have to spell that out. You just say, I found something and you're not gonna like it, because we know who's calling who, right? So you don't, in real life, that happens, not when you're writing. All right, see you in a few. No, it's not necessary. He's on the way. He's on the way. You just don't have to do that. You're going to see that I did a lot of that, and you're going to say, you're going to hate me. And then when you get over it, you're going to appreciate it. Right?
I'm very new to this.
Okay. Well, I'm like you. I knew exactly what a mamba is, and I felt the cop sounded really stupid that he didn't know what milking the snake was about.
I thought the same.
I'm not going to trust this guy dealing with snakes. I'm nervous if he's in charge, man. I know more than he does. So I just thought, don't underestimate the reader. Never underestimate the reader. And I think that's kind of what you're doing here. You're new, so it's understandable. And as you're talking about editing, so all right, write it all out the first time, but then get rid of a lot of that obvious stuff. So what else have I got here? I wanted you to go, and I think you said something like this, go inside their heads more, right? And show what they're really thinking. They're scared, but they're not going to show it to each other. They're professionals. But you as the writer have the opportunity to go inside their head and show what they're feeling and thinking. And remember to write, he thought to himself, because who the hell else would you think it to, right? So So I wanted more atmosphere, more description, and I want you to go into your character's head, but the pace is good. And that's important, because I can't tell you how many things like this, because this is my category now. And I can't tell you how many of these things I read, where it's like, this is supposed to be a thriller, it's supposed to grab me by the throat. And I don't need a sleeping pill tonight, because I can just read another paragraph of this, and I'm out, right? So you have a natural gift for pace, so that's positive, okay?
Lovely.
But you're gonna have to develop a lot of other stuff, but you do, and it's okay. And as long as you can handle everything you're being told today, because rejection is part of being able to take it and being able to pick and choose what works for you for rejection. It's part of becoming a professional writer. And so the fact, again, like this lady, you're not here, you know, the other thing I hate is when someone in your position says to me, well, you just didn't understand it. So you didn't really get that in this part, this such and such a thing. And you're not doing any of that. You're not being defensive. Inside of you, you might be saying, I hate that bitch.
I should describe that.
Right. But you see how that creates tension? What is he really thinking, right? But you get points, and I'm serious about that. For sitting there and trying to take it all in, even though it must be kind of,
It's an eye-opener.
yeah, there you go.
It's what it's supposed to be.
And it can take a while, you know, some of it might sink in and you'll start, and then you'll write again, and then you'll see more, it's a process.
I've got a tremendous amount of comments and material to work with now, and it was all for free, so thank you very much.
You're
It was
welcome.
terrific.
It's our pleasure.
Can I just for that?
Yeah.
So I think everybody has said, you know, I agree with what everybody has said. Just one technical thing on the first page, when she pulls the bag through the tube and cuts the neck off, I thought she actually cut the snake's head off. I didn't realize till after that she didn't actually decapitate the snake. And then I just thought that there was a little too much play-by-play that kind of slowed it down. So for example, on page 2, wheeling the whole assembly over to the x-ray table, she positioned the mama's head under the cone. She took a straight down shot, then wheeled the cone around for a lateral. I thought it was too much. You know, you have her stepping closer, bringing up the magnification. I think you can kind of condense that down. Because to Anne's point, some of it is implied. Like she's obviously looking at it, so you don't have to say that she's looking at it or so I kind of marked that up. But that was probably the biggest critique I had about it, was just I thought there was a little too much play-by-play that slowed it down.
Do you tell the reader elsewhere the scale of the attack and how Charlie was harmed? Because Amy says that could explain why it attacked you. And we don't know about Charlie.
The attacks already happened.
Yes, so you've
It's just 850 people are dead.
Thank you.
Oh.
Wow.
How many?
850.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Just
So
a
we're always at one
Half
time.
of them were pushed in front of a subway train when they went down there. The subway.
Oh.
As a train was coming in. So
Wow.
it's like 100 people were killed, just crushed under the train. It's a
Well, that's
mess.
exciting.
Oh, so it's not just all the snakes, it's just
Wow.
No, it's all, well, it's snakes too.
Right.
It's also people being trampled to death.
It's great. Can't wait for the
Wow.
movie.
Yeah. You know, it's like a movie.
If one came in now, what would happen?
Yeah.
Right.
Don't
Yeah.
pull it out from your jacket. I'm nervous. So she says that explain the attack, why it attacked you. Have Charlie look at his wound or rub his wound.
Well, he didn't have one. They were in
Okay.
Kevlar suits, but
Got it.
they hit him and
Oh,
knocked him
okay.
over.
So
They're
we
all
were-
protected.
How big are they?
They're supposed to
how
run
big are
away, and they didn't. He's supposed to run away.
Thank you.
How
Right.
big are the
They're
snakes?
12 to 14
Oh.
years old,
Wow.
and they can pick up a third of their body off the ground.
That's just nice.
They're gonna use-
Oh, wow.
Nice. Well, do you have any questions for us before we wrap up?
No, I'm kind of realizing I have to rewrite the whole story now based on what you said about editors yawning about Collette and the
I'm
farmer.
sorry, but that is 100% true.
Well, it's good to know before I keep going.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that the cycle may not change in a couple of years, but right now, and if you have abortion in the book, take that out too.
I don't.
All right.
I don't.
There's a couple things that editors, you have to be a gifted writer or really well established to get away with. And I wasn't kidding about abortion or anything threatening to a child, especially sexual. Yeah. But big pharma, unfortunately,
Was that any industry or just pharmaceuticals?
particularly pharmaceuticals, because it's too often authors have relied on that as the answer. It's become a cliche.
The butler did it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you'd be surprised though, when you walk away, it might seem really big. I mean, even when we meet ourselves as a writers group, you know, some weeks I walk away and there's almost nothing, and some weeks I walk away and there's a lot. And if it's more, then it can be overwhelming, but then the second I sit down, it's fine. Now if it's newer for you, it might not be fine right away, but then it just kind of flows, and then these other ideas come in instead. So even though you might be in a state of panic right now, once you sit down and you start working on it, I think
You
you'll
can come up
find,
with 10 ideas.
right, that
I
it'll
can do this, I
get
can do this, I
better.
can do this, I
I
can't
can't go this way, I'll go this way.
Yeah, so just don't, just remember that as you walk away.
She's exactly right. That's what I tell my writers all the time. You're getting all this criticism. It feels like you're being beaten up. Just put the phone down, because I'm usually on the phone, and walk away, go out for a walk, get an ice cream or something, and don't even just let the back of your brain start working on it. And by the time you sit down to it, this is the thing I always love. By the time you sit down to it, it'll be clear to you, or clearer, what you want to do. What I always love is when the client comes back to me and says, I had this idea, and then they repeat my exact advice as though it came to them, right? And I go along with this, like, hey, I wish I had thought of that. How clever.
The inside your head is going.
But she's exactly right, that, it's gonna swirl around, but it'll eventually calm down, and you will see a clearer path.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.